The Evil Dead series has been one of the most consistent horror franchises out there. But with a new director stepping in, I was curious if this would hold up to the 2013 remake and Evil Dead Rise. More importantly, my question concerning this film is simple. Does Evil Dead Burn still feel dangerous, or are we just watching another horror brand keep the lights on? You know this series can get mean, bloody, and deeply personal. So after watching this film last night, we're heading back into the Book of the Dead to see whether Burn earns its place in the modern Evil Dead cycle. And yes, I do have a Necronomicon on my shelf. So yes, I am already biased toward the franchise. But Evil Dead Burn still has to earn it. The book alone is not enough. So let's start with the basic setup. Spoiler free. We can go deeper later with clear warnings when I do. Evil Dead Burn follows Alice, a grieving widow who travels to her late husband Will's secluded family home to reconnect with the family and try to process her loss. It's supposed to be a tense but ordinary visit with her in-laws, but this being an Evil Dead story, the house isn't just holding memories. It's holding something much darker. Inside this home, the family starts to fracture, old wounds reopen, and a connection to the Necronomicon surfaces through their shared history. From there, the visit spirals into a brutal, confined, dead-eyed nightmare that turns grief, marriage vows, and family obligation into weapons. So even if you go in cold, you're getting a contained horror story about a woman trapped in a house with people she loves, while a demonic force twists that love into something violent and ugly. Welcome back to A Constantly Racing Mind, where we dive into sci-fi, horror, action, adventure, pop culture, and all things geek. I'm Rob, and today we're doing a non-spoiler first and then a full spoiler explainer spoiler analysis review of Evil Dead Burn, with an eye on how it plays as a horror experience, how it fits into the franchise, and how the craft and lore hold up. If you like deep dive breakdowns, prop talk, and franchise level horror analysis, hit subscribe, click the bell, and let me know in the comments what your favorite Evil Dead entry is so far. Knowing what we know, I need to talk about the emotional engine of this movie, grief. Evil Dead Burn is tapping into something we've seen in modern horror classics like Hereditary. The idea that grief isn't just sadness, it's a consuming, tangible force that leaves you vulnerable. Alice isn't just fighting deadites, she's fighting her own desperation to hold on to something she lost. The tagline, the vow she took in life, live on, even in death, isn't just marketing. It's the key to the whole movie. The deadites don't just attack. They weaponize love. They use Alice's marriage vows, her memories, and her guilt as tools to break her down. It's grief as a crack in the armor, and the demons pour right through. That said, the thematic elements can feel a little heavy-handed at times. The movie leans hard into gritty realism of trauma, and there are moments where you wish it would just trust the audience a bit more. But when it works, the emotional weight gives the violence a real purpose. Now, for franchise context, without spoilers at this point, modern Evil Dead is basically running a standalone nightmare model. We've got Evil Dead 2013, Evil Dead Rise, and the unofficial Evil Dead film, this year's The Mummy. Lee Cronin's The Mummy. And now Burn, and all three center on the new characters, new locations, and no reliance on Ash Williams showing up to save the day. Burn fits comfortably into that pattern, I think. It doesn't try to copy Raimi's slapstick energy, and it doesn't redo Rise's apartment complex siege. Instead, it chooses a secluded family home and really commits to making that space feel like a trap. Tonally, Burn sits closer to the 2013 remake than to Evil Dead Rise. The humor is almost completely stripped away. You're not getting campy one-liners or Three Stooges slapstick. You're getting grim, punishing horror with a grungy, desaturated visual style that wants you to feel every cut, crush, and impact. So if you like the mean streak of 2013, this movie feels like it's trying to push that line a step further. If you're sensitive to animal harm, brace yourself. The film uses the family dog to establish that no one and nothing is safe in this house. Now let me tell you what worked for me without giving away specific scenes. First up, the visual style. Vanacek's use of constant close-ups with shallow depth of field traps you with the characters in a way that feels genuinely stressful. You can't see what's behind them, you can't see what's coming. The background is always blurred, always uncertain. It's suffocating, it's overwhelming, and honestly, it leaves you with a racing heart. This is a movie that refuses to give you the spatial awareness, and that's a bold creative choice. And it may not work for everybody, but it definitely worked for me. Second, I'm excited because the practical effects are outstanding. After the trailer showed some CGI heavy shots, I was nervous. But the movie delivers physical, tangible gore that looks and feels real. The kills are imaginative. There's a wince-inducing sequence again, literally, that will have you squirming. And there's a beautifully shot moment where a deadite with a bag over its head walks up a wall and onto the ceiling. It's eerie, surreal, and brilliantly executed. And if you're a gorehound, this movie absolutely wants to challenge you. Third, I love the cultural touches. Alice is Parisian. There's a French music woven into the score. And in one particularly memorable sequence, the weaponization of a corkscrew in one sequence feels distinctly, playfully French. It's a small touch, but it gives the film a personality that sets it apart from other modern entries. Fourth, the lore connection. If you're a hardcore fan, this is arguably the most lore-heavy Evil Dead movie we've ever gotten. The movie connects the modern franchise together brilliantly. The house they're trapped in is the exact same location used for Ruby Noby's house in the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show. On top of that, the Necronomicon in this film looks like an investigator scrapbook, complete with newspaper clippings directly referencing the 2013 cabin fire. We even get a connection to Evil Dead Rise with the return of Jessica, the deadite from the lake. For longtime fans, you're getting Easter eggs and connective tissue that suggest these stories are starting to notice each other, even if the films are structured as standalones. Finally, the performances work. Sohaila Yacoub carries the emotional and physical weight of the movie convincingly. The family feels like a real, complicated unit before the horror tears them apart. When that works, Evil Dead Burn has real weight behind the blood. Now I want to discuss what didn't work for me as well as much as I think it should have, and I think it might not work for everyone else. So let's take a quick moment to talk about the comedy. If you only watched the teaser trailers, you might have been a little worried about the franchise was moving away from its goofy tongue-in-cheek roots and becoming just another super serious, gritty possession film. So, does it still have that classic Evil Dead dark comedy? The answer is complicated. And it really depends on what kind of humor works for you. This is one where I'm on the fence on. There is some very little dark comedy, if at all. Pretty much on the same level of Lee Cronin's The Mummy. If your favorite part of Evil Dead is the campy dark comedy and slapstick chaos of Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness, Burn is going to feel like a much tougher sell. This movie strips away almost all of that personality. It's grim, it's punishing, and it's much more interested in making you feel attacked than making you laugh or at least a dark chuckle. On one hand, the movie successfully delivers on that signature sixth sense of humor where the jokes literally write themselves through the absolute depravity of the kills. It relies heavily on gross-out insanity, creating those classic Sam Raimi style moments where you are simultaneously laughing and squirming in your seat. Because the film leans so hard into that suffocating, bleak French extremity vibe, there are moments where the movie ends up being funny when it's not actually trying to be, which can cause a bit of tonal whiplash. That isn't a flaw so much as a choice, but it does mean that some longtime fans may miss that signature Raimi or better yet Evil Dead signature flavor. And here's a quick note and a shameless plug. In Sam Raimi's Send Help from earlier this year, also a horror film, Raimi's signature comedic horror elements stand out. Check out my review for that one. So, where did it land for me? Well, it was kind of a mixed bag. I laughed at a sheer absurdity of the practical effects, but the actual dialogue definitely missed the mark more often than it hit. But humor is completely subjective. What did you guys think? Are you glad the dark comedy is back, or do you prefer the straight-up tear of the 2013 film? Let me know in the comments. But once again, this is not a Sam Raimi directed film, and he did give the director the freedom to do what he wanted. And because the movie deals so heavily with trauma and grief, I need to warn you, there are moments where the thematic elements feel a bit too on the nose. The movie is smart to ground the horror and the emotional weight, but there are scenes that you wish you would trust the audience a little more. The grief is the engine, but occasionally, It feels like the movie is explaining itself rather than letting the horror speak for itself. More on that in the spoiler analysis. Even for me, to some degree, the grungy, desaturated gray palette fits the tone, but combined with the constant close-ups and shallow depth of field, it can become visually exhausting. There are stretches in the movie that are so dark and so tightly framed that you lose some spatial clarity. Depending on your theater and the quality of the projection, some chaotic sequences probably can become harder to read than they should be. This is a tough one because I understand why the movie does it. Evil Dead Burn could have ended about 10 to 15 minutes earlier. The climax hits, the horror peaks, and then the movie keeps going to properly conclude Alice's emotional journey. Great. I appreciate the filmmakers wanted to give the grief arc a proper resolution. But in a movie that otherwise is so relentless, that final stretch can feel like it's kind of overstaying your welcome. You're exhausted. The movie has put you through hell. And then it asks for just a little bit more patience. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a pacing issue worth noting. In my spoiler review, I'll mention the recent movie where the audience felt the same resolution arc could have been left out. So, if you watched the red band and green band trailers before seeing the movie, you might feel a little cheated. The marketing gave away a lot of the major plot beats and gnarly kills. It felt like it put a little too much of the movie's best mayhem into the promotional material. But then again, that may be where we are as a society wanting more up front. Finally, there's a bit of standalone fatigue. We're now on our third modern Evil Dead entry built as a disconnected story with a new cast and new location. The Easter eggs and lore references are fun and they absolutely help, but it's starting to feel like it might be time to move beyond the reset button and actually weave these survivors together. Fans of Mia from 2013 or Beth from Rise may reasonably ask, when do we stop wiping the slate clean and start building something that feels like a continuous saga? Burn doesn't answer that question. It plays as another self-contained nightmare that gestures toward a larger universe without fully committing to it. Now let's talk about the cast a little bit. So Haley Yacoub leads the film as Alice, and that role carries the emotional weight of the setup. Alice is not walking into a normal haunted house situation. She is walking into grief, marriage, family tension, and possession all at once. The in-laws are from hell, literally. Yacoub has already moved through some very ACRM-friendly spaces. She appeared in Dune Part 2, which brings her into the science fiction side of the channel. She was also in Climax, Gaspar Noé's dance horror nightmare that turns movement, body panic, and group collapse into the actual horror. For Evil Dead Burn, her past films are important because Alice is not just a lead character who has to scream and run. She has to carry grief, fear, physical pain, and survival. Evil Dead puts its lead through hell, and Yacoub's background gives her the experience to present the physical screen presence for that. She also comes from a performance background that includes dance and physical discipline, and that agility helps in a movie like this. Evil Dead horror is not polite, it's body horror, it's movement, it's impact, it's endurance. So with Alice, I'm looking at how much of the movie she can carry physically and emotionally. Hunter Dewin plays Joseph. A lot of you will know him from Wednesday, where he played Tyler Galpin. That's a good genre connection because Wednesday sits in that gothic, supernatural, dark comedy lane. He also played Adam Desiato in Your Honor, which is not a horror or sci-fi, but it did give him a role built around pressure, guilt, family fallout, and terrible decisions. Here the family drama has to matter before the Deadite chaos takes over. And Joseph is the character who can connect the story to the larger Evil Dead mythology. And that is a tricky job. You do not want a character who can just explain lore. You want someone who makes the history of the book feel dangerous. Here I believe Dewin walks that line effectively. Candy Wright plays Susan, Will's mother and Alice's mother-in-law. I believe horror fans may recognize Wright from Pearl, where she played Ruth, Pearl's mother. To me, that is a strong connection for this film because Pearl is also about family tension, control, repression, and a house that becomes emotionally poisonous before it becomes violent. Wright also appeared in Love and Monsters, which fits the sci-fi and creature feature side of the channel, and Jack the Giant Slayer, which is the fantasy adventure side. Errol Shan plays Edgar Price. Shan has a long career across New Zealand, Australian, and international productions, and a lot of his work fits the heavier side of genre storytelling. He appeared in Sweet Tooth, which, as you know, is a post-apocalyptic fantasy with a strong survival edge, and Chief of War and Roman Empire, which bring action, history, and brutal power struggles. And I think with this kind of background, his casting makes sense for Evil Dead Burn, because Edgar Price sounds like the kind of character name that belongs inside a cursed family story. And in this version of Evil Dead, the family members need to feel like people with history before the blood starts flowing. Maud Davey plays Polly. Davey has worked across film and television for years, with credits that include The Dry, The Newsreader, Apple Cider Vinegar, and The Leftovers. The work with The Leftovers is the big one. That show sits in a strange place between grief, mystery, faith, trauma, and the unexplained. Evil Dead Burn starts with grief before it turns into possession horror. Polly is not someone I want to over-explain in a non-spoiler review, but Davey's presence helps build the family side of the movie. The Deadites are more effective when the people they destroy feel like they belong somewhere first. George Puller plays Will. I'm keeping this brief because the setup already tells us Alice is dealing with the loss of her husband, and I do not want to step too far into the plot territory here. Puller's credits include It Only Takes a Night, Moonrock for Monday, and Barons. In this film, the key point is not that he brings a long horror filmography, it is that Will is tied directly to the emotional engine of the story. Alice is not just walking into the house for fun. She's walking into grief. She's walking into a family that belongs to someone she lost. Joseph's girlfriend, Tia, is played by Lucianne Buchanan, and as I just mentioned, Errol Shan plays Edgar Price. What is interesting is that they are both New Zealand actors with some overlapping genre and streaming work. Buchanan is widely known for The Night Agent, while Shan has appeared in Sweet Tooth and Chief of War, two projects connected to Buchanan's recent screen world as well. This gives Evil Dead Burn a cast with a strong New Zealand screen industry backbone, which makes sense given how much modern genre work is coming through that pipeline. What I like about the casting approach is that Evil Dead Burn is not selling itself on legacy characters. It's not asking us to clap because someone familiar walked into frame. It's asking a new group of actors to make a new nightmare work. That, I think, is the right move for this movie. Evil Dead can survive without Ash if the new story has a strong location, strong victims, nasty deadites, and a lead character who can take the audience through hell. And then there's Sam Raimi. Raimi is not directing Evil Dead Burn, and as producer, he still matters, obviously because he created the whole thing with Evil Dead in 1981 when he was only 22 years old, and his influence is all over the place. This franchise exists because Raimi, Rob Tappert, and Bruce Campbell took a small, nasty cabin horror movie and turned it into one of the most recognizable horror brands ever made. And what I like about the modern Evil Dead run is that Raimi has not forced every new movie to become an Ash Williams reunion tour. The modern films are using Evil Dead more like a curse that keeps moving. New people, new places, same evil. And I think that is the right way to keep the Necronomicon alive. And as producer, Raimi's role is not just protecting a title, he's protecting a set of instincts. The book has to matter, the Deadites have to be cruel, the violence has to have personality, and the movie has to feel like it's pushing past good taste. So as of this recording, Evil Dead Burn has a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 128 critic reviews. The popcorn score meter reads at 81% with more than 250 verified ratings. Metacritic is coming in lower at 55 out of 100 based on 34 critic reviews, which puts it in mixed territory. However, the audience score shows 7.0 with 18 verified users. IMDb holds at 6.9 out of 10 and Letterboxd shows a positive 3.5 out of 5. And CinemaScore gives it a B. It's still early and these scores are changing. Since I got home last night and started recording, I have seen the scores drop from the high 70s at 77 on Rotten Tomatoes to where we are now. Now, Metacritic has only dropped a point or two since I started. IMDb and Letterboxd is holding steady at 6.9 out of 10, and of course the 3.5 out of 5. I suspect the grim tone and extreme violence may be more than some general horror fans. On the constantly racing mind scale, Evil Dead Burn lands somewhere between a 4.5 and a 5. I'm kind of wavering on that one. Some of the issues I mentioned kind of bring it down a little bit. But for me, this movie that succeeds at physical horror more than anything else. It wants to hurt, it wants to exhaust, it wants to make the Evil Dead name feel dangerous again. For hardcore Evil Dead fans, this is something that you need to go see. You definitely have to be there at the theater, waiting with your popcorn and drink. The lore connection and brutal set pieces make it essential viewing, even if you miss the dark comedy. For general horror fans, this is probably something you need to get an acquired taste to, but it's a definite must-see. If you like grim, punishing horror with inventive gore and a grief-forward emotional core, this delivers. But if you need tonal variety or levity, temper your expectations. And for viewers who do not like gore, body horror, or mean-spirited possession movies, this is an easy warning. This franchise is not here to be gentle. As for mid and post-credit scenes, there are some, so go ahead and take a look. Keep your seats, don't go anywhere, stay put. As we were waiting for the film to start and the previews were playing, a Jason Statham preview began. I turned to my wife and said, "When watching any Statham film, you know what you're getting into. Jason's doing the same thing every film. We go because it's familiar and fun. So too are the Evil Dead films. You're going to get a story about dark lore, deadites, insane blood and gore, maybe some dark comedy, hopefully some new props, and ultimately a final girl. This film checks all the boxes for me. Some better than others, but that is why this is not a solid 5 out of 5. The audience I was with said they liked it. However, one lady and her kid left right as the third act was starting. The kid shouldn't have been there. I like to see films over and over. I saw The Mummy back to back. This week I rewatched 2013's Evil Dead and Rise several times while getting ready for this film. However, I will need at least a few days to recover from this film before I do a rewatch. Evil Dead Burn works best when it remembers that this franchise is not just about blood, it's about punishment, it's about the wrong words being read, the wrong door being opened, and ordinary people finding out way too late that evil does not negotiate. The Necronomicon is back, the deadites are back, and the only thing that really matters is whether Burn makes the curse feel dangerous again. And for me, it mostly does. But whether it earns its place alongside the best of the franchise, that's a conversation I want to have in the comments. Well, those are my non-spoiler takes on Evil Dead Burn. If you've seen it, tell me your general thoughts down below. No detailed kill descriptions. And please keep it light on spoilers so people can still discover this one fresh. My spoiler version will be out soon, and if you haven't seen it yet, let me know which Evil Dead movie you think sets the bar for this franchise. So, for more sci-fi, horror, action-adventure breakdowns, prop culture deep dives, and all things geek, you're already in the right spot. A constantly racing mind. Make sure you check out the merch link in the description. Don't forget the RunP app when you go to the movies, and thanks for watching. As always, keep your mind racing and your eyes on the screen. Take care.